Oh, I hate those elves. For days and days I think about how much I despise those twingly twinks. My burning hatred towards those frolicking fairies is the fairness that fuels my rage. Ooh, I simmer in spite. Ooh, those fancy pansies with their skinny legs and pointy ears. They think they're above it all, thinking goblins and gnomes are the same because we're all short. But no, call one of those high elves a drow and they'll jump out of their pantaloons. They think they're above it all. They think they're so great, so wonderful. And you, fools that you are, you humans are tricked and deceived by their magic and their illusions. But they got you under their charms, haven't they? You humans think elves are so elegant and beautiful, made of music and moonbeams. You fools, fools, I tell you. They got you under their charms, under their illusions, under their mind-melding magic. You're brainwashed by elven propaganda. Don't deny it. I've seen what you post online, shamelessly. You treat them like idols of worship, but they look down upon you like dogs. All of human history, every fable and folklore has been warning you against the fey folks, the beings that dwell in the woods. But all it took was, admittedly, a really good book series made by a really good writer that did a great job with portraying dwarves as well. But it's his fault, Tolkien's fault. He did a really great job in reimagining old elves and fairies and turned them into some elegant, illustrious, and perfect beings that now all of you humans worship and idolize. Tolkien, okay, we must admit that he did a really great job modernizing and reintroducing fairy tales and mythical beings into the modern world and giving them a new life. They did a great job with dwarves as well. But Tolkien was an elf lover through and through. And we need to recognize it and deal with it. Because the propaganda, the brainwashing, the elven industrial complex have brainwashed the youth. Tolkien turned once dangerous and foreboding creatures into these elegant, godlike, and mysterious, all-perfect beings with immortality and natural beauty. Well, some of them aren't all that great, but most of them are near perfect and mysterious and elegant and have no real faults of their own. And this is the propaganda that we must fight. From him came the modern idea of an elf, of this perfect, illustrious being, of near godlike understanding of magic and nature, with immaculate beauty and elegance. And that has been the dominating image that has been brainwashing you all. But now in this video I'll try to break the conditioning and realize what elves truly are, what they represent, what they mean throughout our history, throughout our culture, and what they represent in us. Alright. I'm gonna cool down a bit. This topic gets me really emotional because I despise those elves. Ooh, I hate elves. Oh, okay, let's calm down a bit. Hello, my name is Bordo. If you're new here, I do a lot of historical and mythological content. I also make a lot of armor and weapons, talk about them, and I'm making a series about reintroducing and re-examining popular fictional characters such as dwarves, orcs, and now introducing elves. I try to do a deeper dive, going back to its mythological origins, going around the world, trying to have similar examples, different interpretations, then also try to do a lot of historical re-examining and comparison, and what it means as an archetype. And elves is one of the most complicated beings. I've talked about dwarves before, I've talked about orcs before, and this video will tackle the topic of elves, which is really difficult because it is one of the most common yet most mysterious and more unique examples, especially in modern interpretation. There are many similarities if we go in the historical past and especially in mythological past. First of all, why am I dressed like this? Now, in each video I try to look more like the typical example of a fantasy character, but with my features, I can't really embody the elven elegance as it's commonly depicted with its skinny, baby-faced nature. And I try to go more gnomish design. This is actually a Scythian warrior's outfit. And this is the type of content I make. I dress up as silly historical characters and try to connect to mythological and fantastical. So, why am I dressed like this? It's a Scythian warrior's outfit. Scythians were Indo-Iranic groups that traveled around northern Eurasian steppe and had connection to a lot of past historical cultures, and I think a lot of ideas of gnomes and elves might have come from interaction with their culture and maybe many others. I try make many parallels, but first let's get into mythology. Mythology, of course, elves come from Germanic myths, especially popularized by Scandinavian mythology, but similar archetypes. Fairies actually come from Irish and Celtic folklore, and there is actually a similar world in Persian mythology, which is Bari. It's also introduced in Georgian mythology. I'm Georgian, if you can tell with my huge beard. And it's called Peria. Peria, fairy, Pari, they have same origins. And that's why I dressed up like a Iranian warrior, because I wanted to give Iranian origins for this mythical character. Bari. Baris are basically Middle Eastern fairies. Middle Eastern fairies popularized from Persian mythology and later introduced even in Islamic texts, where it's attributed to being one of the first beings that God created after angels. First angels, then Bari, then jinn, and then humans. And in also Persian folklore, they are this near angelic nature spirits with divine beauty, not my gruff, hairy beauty. Very similar to every other Indo-European perception of a nature or near divine, not godlike, but not human, somewhere in between. That's where fairies and elves reside. They're not human, they're not God, they're somewhere in between the heavenly hierarchy. I think it also connects to the caste system that existed. Gods were the most above, humans were the most below, and there were many local spirits, spirits of nature, spirits of mountains, and messenger spirits, and that's where Paris come in. Of course, we can go into the Scottish and Celtic mythology, where the proper fairies exist. Fairies are, of course, the most popular depiction of the Fae archetype. That's where the word Fae comes from, which are this nature-dwelling spirits of ancient past. They live in different realms. They hold many ancient secrets and have connection to the land before even humanity came. And they're most connected with ancient burial sites. I would like to recommend you to watch one of my older videos where I talk about similar concept of ancient ruins and burial sites being connected to medieval ideas of the ancient spirits turning into fairy and mythical creatures, where pre-Christian burial sites and ancient ruins and temples became associated with the old world, old magical world in the Middle Ages. Middle Ages, or as some call it, the Dark Ages, were called the Dark Ages because it was after the much more advanced Greco-Roman age, when the Roman Empire, Western Roman Empire, Eastern Roman Empire still survived, but when Western Roman Empire fell, many of the ruins of the Western Roman Empire were attributed to giants and fairies. And this is one of the historical origins for this archetype. I have a whole video dedicated on exactly that topic, so you can check out where I go deeper into this idea. But let's skip to the elves and going back to Scandinavian myths, where the word elf originates. Alf, if I'm trying to pronounce. Okay, I might have a lot of trouble pronouncing these words, especially when we talk about elves. And in Scandinavian myths, there are two types of elves. There is the light elves, the Ljóselfar, if I'm pronouncing it right. That means the light elves, and Dökkelfar. If I'll write both of them down there. And the light elves reside in the Alfheim, and the dark elves reside in the realm of Svartalfheim, which is the underworld or the dark realm where the dark, more shadowy elves reside. Not a lot is written down about elves. They're mentioned a lot of times. They're implied to have their own realm, their own lore, and complex stories and kingdoms. But the text that we have in the Eddas, we don't have a lot of surviving text. What we have is, for example, Elven Smith Wayland, or there are many different interpretations of it, where a human king binds a magical elf, Smith, a powerful Smith elf, and makes him craft weapons and jewels for his family until he manages to escape, does a lot of bad things to the family, and then flies off and returns to his realm. This is a really interesting interpretation of the elf archetype. Of course, smithing is more associated with dwarves, especially Tolkien really loved this idea and has many great elven smiths in his stories. And the story of Wayland is actually very interesting because it has two very popular mythical narratives. One is, of course, kidnapping of a smith, which is actually really popular in world mythology because smiths were really valuable, and oftentimes more barbaric and more savage and more brutal rulers would steal and kidnap other kingdoms and other people's smiths and enslave them and force them into labor. This is kind of funny because I'm dressed up like a Scythian warrior, where Scythians used to kidnap Caucasian Georgian blacksmiths and force them to craft their weapons and armor and jewelry. And there is many stories in Georgian myths, especially around Irkush, the blacksmith godson, who was kidnapped by the giants and was forced to craft those evil giants their weapons, the Devi. And there is also another narrative, which is binding of a fake creature, binding of these magical beings, which is popular all over the world, not just in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in Americas. It's really interesting because a lot of stories where elf or elf-like creatures are involved, it's usually about how human traps them by usually taking a bit of their body. Sometimes it's hair, sometimes it's nails, sometimes it's other body parts, and it's usually sealed in an iron box. There are stories with this exact same plot in Georgia, in Scandinavia, in Japan, everywhere in the world. When you learn mythology, you really pick up on similar plots, and that is one of the most common plots, that the fake creatures are, one, affected by iron. We have iron here. This is brass and iron. Iron affects them like it's a magical word against them. We, of course, know the iron nail or iron horseshoe, the cold steel, as it's commonly called. All steel is cold, but which wards off and hurts the Fey folk. And usually you would steal their body part, be it hair, be it nails, or be it any other part, and you lock it in a iron case, an iron bag or something, iron that protects a fey creature from getting back to it, and now they become your servants, your slaves, until every story ends with either the family member from centuries later or some case and some cause, the piece of their body part that has been removed is returned to the fey creature, and then they curse the family, they do horrible deeds to them, and they return to their realm. There is also a variant of this where a skin changer's animal skin is hidden. In many stories, humans actually have families with those skin changers, but as soon as they can get their hands on their skin, they return to the natural world and often take the children with them, which is really interesting. This is really specific story that can be found, again, from Japan to Irish coast, completely different sides of Eurasian continent. All right, jumping around the whole mythological world map, I really want to come back to Georgia, where I'm from, and introduce you to characters that I will delve much deeper into later dedicated videos, but I want to introduce you here, which are Dali, Ali, and Kaji. These are completely different beings in Georgian folklore, and this narrative of their body parts being taken from them and hid in a box and them being entrapped is really common. For example, Ali are associated with water spirits, and they're described exactly the same way Scandinavian or Slavic folktales describe these fey creatures. Beautiful, elegant, dressed in all white with either golden hair or golden reddish fiery hair, which are beautiful, elegant, but very dangerous. They either entrap humans and drown them, or seduce them, or drive them mad, or usually all three of them. Seduce them, drive them mad, and then drown them. But many stories also tell that some humans foolishly try to bind them, either stealing their hair, stealing their nails, and they become their servants, their wives, until again they return their body part and bring about centuries-long feuds with those fairy creatures, and those families either are completely extinct, either through bad luck, direct murders of the fairy creature, or often some horrible disease takes them out. Ali reside in the waters, but there is a forest-dwelling spirit or a nature or hunter goddess such as Dali, which many of the surviving stories is about how hunters accidentally fall prey to the Dali, to this nature goddess who seduces them, has fun with them, and blesses them their hunt. But the hunter usually has a wife at home. Either the wife takes revenge on the Dali, or husband doesn't leave the wife for the Dali, and whole mess ensues. I really want to make a dedicated video about this topic, but I want to introduce this concept in the more popularly accessible videos such as Elves, so my other videos can get views. Please watch my other videos, especially around the mythology that doesn't involve popular fantasy characters. Watch my other videos, please. I've talked about these characters in one of my other videos where I visit a ancient 4,000-year-old stone-carved citadel next to a river called Uplisciche, where I go into the ancient matriarchal fire cult that existed there. Check out that video as well. Going around the world map tour of finding similar archetypal characters to elves, we now head to Greece, where Greek myths are one of the most popular, but one of the underrated creatures from Greek mythology are the nature spirits of nymphs and oceanids. There are similar how in Georgian mythology there are nature spirits, water spirits, all of them beautiful and elegant and seductive. There are many similar creatures in Greek mythology. They are described in much more in depth, where these creatures are part of the god family. They're usually descendants of either titans or later Olympic gods, usually marry or have children, or often have servants that originate as nymphs and oceanids or other nature spirits. They, as I've described before, are somewhere in between humans and gods. They often interact with humans, seduce them, have children with them, but they're closer associated with the gods. They are from god families. For example, oceanids are literally the children of the Okeanos, the titan of oceans, the previous rulers of the sea before Poseidon came along. Oceanids often interact with regular humans. Many humans might not ever come into contact with Zeus or Hera or Artemis, but they might come into contact with, for example, Artemis's entourage of dryads that hunt with her. They are basically smaller local gods that still answer to higher authorities, but are much above regular humans because they're still immortal. They have magical powers, but can be harmed and killed by regular human heroes or villains. In my theory, these in-between gods and men, these creatures that are popular all over the world mythology, spirits of nature, spirits of local cities or local mountains or local places, they are remnants of much older, less polytheistic. Before polytheism, there were much more scattered number of deities, but when polytheism came around, well, it got crushed into a couple of gods, but the local spirits and local spirits of local river, local places, on and on and on, still remained. And I think their beautiful nature, their beautiful feminine nature is connected to the old matriarchal cults. We know from archaeology that before patriarchal sky deities, you had matriarchal nature deities, and we have many statues of small gods that are scattered all over human settlements, and they represent private protectors and private guardian spirits, maybe of a family, maybe of a cave. And again, going back to Georgian mythology, we have similar concept of a Adgilis Deda, a place mother, a mother protective spirit of a household, a hearth, a cave, a mountain, or even a small tree itself. Everything has a spirit, everything has a protector or a guardian. And those guardians are not bound by the same morality that later good and evil style understanding of the world came to be. They are both they can be both harmful and helpful because they are spirits of nature, and nature can give you boons. It can give you food, it can give you medicine, it can give you shelter, but from nature also diseases, predators, and illnesses come from. Many of those ancient spirits are associated with diseases. Similar matriarchal figures are Dobilni in Georgian mythology. They are the sisters that bring diseases. These beings are associated with nature and all sides of nature, both good and bad. And there are many such matriarchal, feminine, beautiful spirits that are associated with diseases, such as Dobilni. Dobilni translates to sisterhood, and they're sisterhood of divine spirits who can both bring health, but can also bring many diseases. And you have to pray to them not to bring you health, but to not kill you, basically. The rituals involve appeasing those spirits. There are similar creatures called the Batonebi. Batonebi are master spirits that you have to appease. You have to sing songs to them, as sung to the diseased person, give them food, give them nurture, give them care. This is, I think, early humans trying to understand why people get ill and how to help them out. Because when you are ill, rest, good food, and good care will be determining from dying or living often. And before we knew about medicine, the rituals were interpreted as that you have to appease the not evil but malicious spirit that inhabits them. They're not evil, they're just part of nature. Like life and death is all part of nature. So is disease, so is illness. So you had to appease those spirits so they may give you a chance for life. This is not just in Georgian mythology, it's worldwide mythology. And one of the interpretations where the word affliction comes, elf affliction, if I'm interpreting the words correctly, it means that elf curse. Elf gave you a curse of a disease. Disease doesn't come from out of nowhere or from eating a bad food or a bad fruit. It comes from a malicious elf that decided to curse you with some sort of a disease. This is not only illnesses brought on from viruses, from eating wrong food, also mental illnesses were especially associated with elves, driving people mad, giving them delusions, giving them visions, giving them hallucinations, were all associated with the elf-affliction. This is why all of mythology before Tolkien came around thought elves were really dangerous and you had to avoid them, and associated elves with mushrooms. And let's talk about that exact topic later on, because it's a complicated hole that we can go deeper and deeper into later on. So, going back to Tolkien, Tolkien took inspiration from world mythology, especially from Scandinavian and Celtic mythology, but he brought in more Christian influence. In Christian influence, he connected the idea of an elf with more angelic features. That's why the old idea of an elf is a trickster spirit that can both give you help, but usually will harm you or drive you insane or give you some sort of a horrible disease. Now, in Tolkien's interpretation, elves are these ancient, elegant, immortal beings of light and purity. That's more associated with angels. In Christianized folk belief, where old pre-Christian ideas and more modern Christian ideas came into contact, the elves and fairies and fey creatures were thought to be angels that didn't participate in the war of heaven and hell, where losers of the war, Lucifer and his army, were cast down into hell and banished into the underworld. The angels that didn't participate and chose neutrality, they were cast out of heaven, but not punished to go into the underworld. So they decided to dwell in the nature. They dwell in the mountains and spirits and so on and so forth. And that's the Christian interpretation of spirits of nature. They did not deny their existence, but they associated first with angels that didn't the neutral angels that didn't participate in the war of heaven and hell, but later on, where Christianity really tried to wash away any pagan past, they were associated with more demonic features, and they were considered to be pure evil. Before then, they were considered to be neutral side in the war between heaven and hell, but later and later on, they were considered demonic figures, and after, they were considered to not even be real. But that's more later on. So the old interpretation of Christianity didn't really deny their existence, but try to place them in the Christian binary of heaven and hell. Where do the elves and fairies and goblins and ghouls, ghouls are more demonic and undead, where the goblins and fairies fit? They fit in the middle. They are the spirits of nature because they didn't participate in the war of heaven and hell. Here we see three archetypal elf interpretation, which is elf of the heavens, which are the high elves, elves of the nature, which are the wood elves, and elves of the hell and the underworld, which are the dark elves. This is the three major realms that exist in all world mythologies: the heavens, the underworld, and the natural world. Elves are the beings that dwell in all three of them. And in Tolkien's interpretation, they're more associated with heavenly realm, the high elves, and their features are more reminiscent of pre-flood humans. I've made many videos about flood mythology and pre-flood humanity. Please check out my videos about floods. I've made multiple, where I mentioned that world mythology always talks about pre-flood world as the age where humans lived for 900 and hundreds of years. Before and after the flood, humanity is cursed to live no more than 120 years. Before the flood, humanity had a lifespan of 900 or so years. In the Bible, Methuselah is the oldest living human, who lived about 960 some. Not really longer than any other. And they had much more closer connection to the God of the world. In some interpretations, the God's sons described are not fallen angels or angels sent to watch over humanity, but are humans who decided to not go with the sons of Cain, but keep with the sons of Adam and keep to the old ways and keep the closer connection to the divine. That is, I think, where Tolkien connected the elf, especially the high elf, the light elf association, and created his modern idea of an elf. Gone are the trickster, mischievous, woodland-dwelling, curse-giving elves, and now the high, beautiful, elegant, and divine-natured elves who have direct connection to the divine world is born. Modern idea of an elf is actually a fusion of Tolkien's perfect elf and this old mischievous form of an elf. And most of interpretation in every fantasy story is some sort of a mix of both. Is it trickster, mischievous elf that lives in the woods and does a little dance and can give you a magical item or curse you? This kind of a look of an elf? Or is it more high, elegant, and near godlike being? As D&D has three major types of elf: high elf, wood elf, and dark elf, the drow. We can interpret all of the other elves. There are many, many different names: the Eldari, the Old Ones, or many, many different names for those kind of creatures. I know the video is getting really long, but I also want to return to Georgian myths and tell you about Kaji. Kaji are, I've joked about my previous video where I talked about dwarves, how dwarves interpret elves, because that actually fits really perfectly into this three archetype of an elf: the high elf, the wood elf, and the dark elf. In Georgian myths, Kaji is more of an insult or a bad word because they're associated with the underworld dwelling evil magical beings that kidnap humans, enslave them, do magical experiments on them, and often heavenly heroes and heroic humans have to quest in the underworld to slay them, steal their magical artifacts, and free humans from their captivity. This is one of the Kaji, the Earth Kaji, or modern similarities to the Drow, the underworld Kaji. But there are lesser known water Kaji who dwell in the river and forests, who are more neutral, can hurt humans, but will not mess with them if they don't get under turf. And Air Kaji. Air Kaji are servants of gods and usually fight in the armies of heavenly kingdoms, such as the Cloud King in the story of Amirani. I really need to make more videos about Georgian mythology, delving deep into the stories, and use the... Basically, I make the fantasy videos to introduce to you the ideas of this character, so later on I can delve much deeper into it. Let's finally talk about historical interpretations. I've mentioned before that elves and fairies are associated with ancient ruins of long past civilizations. Going back to Tolkien, in Tolkien stories, Lord of the Rings takes place in the Third Age. The Third Age is similar to old understanding of different ages of human history. We have Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Age. We are in the Fourth Age, the Age of Iron, where humanity has completely severed their ties with the divine world and is only existing in mortal flesh existence. But previous ages were much more connected to the divine and the heavenly. Golden Age is first age of humanity, where we are in direct communion with the gods. We dine on the same table and we have direct connection with the creators that created us. But that age falls, and then comes Silver Age. Silver Age is more separated from the divine. It's more long-living creatures that have magical abilities but less connected to the divine world. And then comes the Bronze Age. Bronze Age is age of war, age of strife. And that age ends in the world flood. And after that comes Heroic Age, where ruins of this ancient past exist. Some half human, half divine beings, demigods, still roam the earth fighting for humanity. But after that comes the Iron Age that we all exist in, which is also connected to the historical ages. For example, Bronze Age was... We don't know a lot about the Bronze Age. It's very mysterious. We have many ruins and ancient artifacts and some myths and stories. Most of Greek myths take place in the last age of the Bronze Age, which is about 1300 BC. And after it is the fall of the Bronze Age. And the Bronze Age world was actually really connected. To create bronze, metals, tin was brought from British Isles and Spain and many other parts of the world, brought here in the Caucasus, where the blacksmith, the bronze smith, which were the magical smiths who knew the ancient secrets of the bronze, created the artifacts and sold across the Mediterranean and the Middle East. which was the civilized world, but then a massive war happened where the sea peoples ran across the Bronze Age world, especially around the Mediterranean, and caused the collapse of the trade that connected the world and created the Dark Age. After the ancient Dark Ages, new civilizations rose up from the ashes, such as Persian Empire, such as Greek and Roman civilizations that again connected the Middle Eastern and the Mediterranean world. But then another crash happened and the Dark Ages came through. And Dark Ages is where we get a lot of fables and fairy tales, especially around connected to old ruins, old citadels of either from the Greco-Roman age or even older, the Bronze Age. I think that's where the idea that elves hate silver comes from, because those old fairy mounds had deposits of bronze weapons and none of the iron weapons. So maybe the humans who discovered one of the old mound burials found bronze weapons and didn't find any iron weapons, and connected two and two together and thought, oh, that must mean they really hated iron and didn't bury their dead with it. Okay, I've been rambling, stretching this video out. I could talk more and more, but slowly let's get to the end. Why I don't like elves. Let's get to the main topic of this video. Finally. Okay, thank you for sticking by me all this long, but one of the big reasons I don't like the elves and the elf archetype is that it represents something that I think is a negative trait of humanity, which is pursuit of perfection and pursuit of natural perfection. Elves are great, elves are beautiful, elves are wonderful because they're elves. Not because they did something, not because they accomplished something. That's why, for example, I like dwarves and gnomes, hobbits.
They've got a deep love of the arts.
Change the tune, why don't you?
Because they live a great life, because they work hard. They either are great farmers, great artisans, great workers. The dwarves are great blacksmiths and create great works of art. Gnomes are great thinkers and they make really cool tinctures or innovations, and they're very creative. Halflings really love quiet life, but they're also great farmers. They're connected to nature and have great foods, and all of them are great because they do something great. Elves are great because they're elves. And that's why that's what I don't like about them. Elves are great because they come from a lineage of immortal, beautiful, ageless creatures that are naturally magically connected, naturally beautiful, naturally this, naturally this. And that gives me some darker association with some more modern Germanic mythic ideas of what pure white creatures can be. The idea of an elf, this image was also instrumental in a lot of racist interpretations of the ancient Aryans, the ancient foundational white race that was once so great before the swarthy and ugly corruptive creatures came into the society and brought corruption into this world. But there was a time where these beautiful white creatures lived in the natural world and had perfect immortal lives. This idea of an elf is also root idea of a lot of racist and some German 1930s to 1930s propaganda. Especially, it's actually unfortunately really popular in modern neo-pagan and neo-shmeo those type of people who think that their blood and their birth gives them some sort of divine or I just don't like this idea that your birth, your bloodline, just because you exist and you're associated with some culture and some people, you're perfect by nature and everyone is lesser than you because they're not born like you. This is what Elven stories and Elven archetypes remind me a lot of. The blood purity, the half-elf, and the white elf and the pure elf being immortal, but half elf being lesser, and less elf blood you have, less magical you are. The similar origin of an elf archetype also is connected to this negative idea that is really popular in neo-pagan, neo-Schnazi groups that are becoming more and more popular. This is why, again, I really like dwarves, gnomes, and halflings. They are great because they do a lot of great things. No, racism is bad. Alright, I'm stretching this video out far too long. A few things I want to say is that we should try to connect to our ancestors, and we should be proud of our heritage, but we should use it as the way to better ourselves and continue their works, continue their culture. We should be immortal like dwarves, not by living long because we have magical blood in us, but because we are connected to our ancestors, by continuing their traditions, by continuing their works, and by building upon their arts and crafts and continuing their traditions. But this should never be a reason to discriminate against someone, and this should never be a reason to think less of someone. I hate elves not because of their blood, but because they're hypocrites and they're racist. That's why I don't like them. These videos I make about the dwarves, orcs, and now elves is connected to a series I'm trying to build about world building. Later on I'm going to go into more details about these topics. I'm gonna reach 20k soon, and hopefully I already reached it before I upload this video. And I want to make a Q&A, as I really loved where my favorite YouTubers would make Q&As and answer questions from the viewers. And if you like to do that, write questions in the comments. I try to read all of the comments. Even if I don't respond, I try to read. So before we end this video, great thanks to my Patreon supporters. Some of them have been more supportive recently. I'll try to reorganize to give opportunity to others who want to support even more. And we'll be making more projects, more interesting projects about mythology, folklore, and fantasy. And sorry for my messy upload schedule. Really difficult things are going on, not just in my country, in the world, but especially in the country that I live in. And we should try to do our best in the difficult times and try to use escapism, and not just to avoid the problems, but find solutions for them. This is one of the greatest things of stories, and fantasy stories especially. We can think outside of the box and find greater and better solutions and imagine a better world. Imagine problems that we can solve, and imagine a better world that we can create together. So let's work together to bring about a better world through our imagination and our creativity. Thanks for watching, and take care.